So, those of us who know what we're talking about and aren't going to bootleg to the status quo, we know that there used to be a show, I don't know if it's still around, called American Gladiators. But the main point is that it was about sport, it was about a show, these people weren't fighting for honor. And as it kind of faded away, you saw the rise of the UFC and the MMA. This is not a coincidence. In fact, I'm going to play you two clips, one from the American Gladiator commercial, the other from Rome, the Rise and Fall of an Empire, Episode 2, Spartacus. Here's the first one.
You must conquer them. Good luck with that. American Gladiators premieres January 6th on NBC.
Okay. Now, this is a description of gladiators in Rome. And like I said in the past, they were criminals and who were condemned to death, and they were doing something that was dishonorable. It was entertainment, it was sport. These weren't the best fighters. Those were reserved for elite units on the battlefield.
Top professional fighters in the most expensive entertainment of the time, or they could sometimes be condemned criminals for.
They tend to be regarded in this way as being the lowest of the low, people whose bodies are at the disposal of others.
Gladiators could be either the top professional fighters in the most expensive entertainment of the time, or they could sometimes be condemned criminals forced to fight.
So they tell you flat out this is entertainment. And it goes back to the difference between martial arts entertainment and, actual combat skills, transferable skills. And also remember that the Romans, had like 60 pounds of armor on. So when people started wearing metal armor, more than just leather, but metal, it ceased being martial arts. So when you go back to martial arts as such, it doesn't take a genius to figure out who was the best. And you must consider all these things that white people have, one might argue, evolved to focus more on carrying weight, just like you see in the army, right? The military. One wouldn't say that the military, are martial artists. Why do you think these Navy SEAL guys and stuff, why do you think they don't compete with martial artists? They don't do very well at sparring. Why do you think that they rarely even get in the UFC? Because they're very much focused on carrying weight and not on applying martial arts. I don't think I have to explain to anyone with a rational mind the significance of Europeans needing to have on 60 pounds of armor before they enter North Africa as a formidable force. And the fact that the Mediterranean basin, the southern Europe, Italy, and what have you, in Greece, these were occupied. This was the area of the Roman army. I mean, going all the way, into the first Barbarian War, when the hordes of the Cimbri, the Teutoni and Bronis, the first Barbarian War, from 113 all the way to Marius's victory in Acqui Sectae, modern-day France, where Marius first slayed 100,000 of them, and then in the second major battle, he slayed 120,000 of them. But before that, there was victories because, the Romans' ego was their downfall. But when a real soldier that knew what he was doing, not a politician, engaged him, he decimated him. And this soldier, even though historians try to say that, he was bad in politics, he was able to have 7 consulships and die around 86 BC. So I don't think 7 consulships, shows or implies that this person was bad at politics. These historians are making the wrong inferences. Also keep in mind there was ruling families in Rome before they were replaced by warlords from the ancient version of the military industrial complex. And also keep in mind that 35% of the population were enslaved. So when you look at these Americans following in the footsteps of Rome, you know, that's where you get your white slaves from. You know, you have these upper middle class and these upper class whites with all the money, and then you have this white slave population that's dumbed down to serve them. And the only chance they have at getting the foots up is for a warrior to unite them all and to be ruthless and to take over politics in the new Rome, as they did in the old Rome. And to do that, they must address the ruling families and put them in check. So it is really utterly absurd to suggest that I'm wrong about my top martial arts challenge. I mean, I have no respect for people who don't have the basic honor to concede the most obvious of points that I've made. You know, that if they could beat me, they would. In a nation where most people are debt slaves and 1 in 3 adults admits that they are struggling, it is beyond absurd and preposterous to think that people would not understand the significance of my top martial artist challenge, even though I'm covertly drugged. Okay? Now go look at, you know, any depiction of the old gladiators, right? They were people who were dodging, they were striking, they were using both hands. Unlike a fencer, they were using both hands, they were dodging. Sometimes they were kicking their enemy, and that kick opened them up to slay the person. They would knock them off their feet with their kick, or they push them back just in time for the next blow. So all these blows in sparring are significant and absolutely representative of taking the upper hand in battle or delivering a fatal blow. So it's very absurd that people are playing stupid about the relevance of my challenge. It's very absurd that people think that I would get a fair shake. I guarantee you, I would not be given a fair shake in any tournament or any gym, because these people, as large groups of people, have been gang stalking me. Thousands and thousands and thousands of them. And that's not even really a significant portion of how many of them are involved in the Great Conspiracy. There's over 2 million Freemasons alone in America. These people haven't even gone through the tip of the iceberg of their vast network of oppressors. And who do you think owns the gyms and runs the tournaments? It's these secret society guys. They're not going to give me a fair fucking shake. They're cheaters. They're liars. They fabricate evidence. They wish to prove their lie to be true by any means necessary. The only way for me to have a fair shake is to do it on camera, under the honor system, which is when you're hit, you concede. And that's one of the things the challenger did right, is that when he lost, he conceded. The honor system, fighting for honor. And even when you look at the documentaries, The Rise and Fall of an Empire, episode 1, they say flat out the Romans were fighting for honor. Also the Cimbri, the Teutones, and the Brones were also fighting for honor. And these were the Northern Europeans who were taller, and even the historians in the documentary said that they were tougher than the Southern Europeans because of their climate, according to them, which, extreme climate either way makes tougher people, not just extreme cold, but also extreme heat, as you find in Africa. So they say, no, these were tougher, but it was their armor, it was their technology that allowed them to defeat the Northerners, the Germans. So there's a lot of things that you can understand here. How were these Mediterranean peoples able to do so well? It's because they were in a strategic location. The Northerners were separated from Southern Europe by the Alps. They were extremely separated from the Asians as well. They're far away. Therefore, logically, they're also separated from North Africa by the Mediterranean Sea and the Alps. Very long journey for them to get there. It is absurd to think that the Egyptian pharaohs were some kind of, Northern European people, or they were from an island in Northern Europe, in England or something. You know, and it's just nonsense. Nonsense. What they expect you to believe is absolute nonsense coming from the source of Freemasonry. Do you really think it's a coincidence they want you to believe that King Tut was more closely related to the English people, you know, than any other people, when Freemasonry also comes from England, you know, and Egypt is key in their philosophies and the Roman perspective of Egypt. It doesn't add up historically. You don't see a massive migration of people from all the way from England to Egypt. Nonsense. They were separated for tens of thousands of years. I mean, what they expect you to believe is so ridiculous, so nonsensical, so far-fetched, that you would have to be the greatest moron to believe it. You'd have to be the type of person to spend all your money on swampland for no reason at all. I mean, how stupid would you have to be to believe that the pharaohs were these Englishmen ruling over these Africans thousands of miles away across the Mediterranean and the Alps and worse? Not to mention all the ethnic groups in between them. Absolute madness, absolute nonsense, 100% proof that whatever they suggest and present is falsified. Thank you. To prove my point, I will direct you to episode 2, Spartacus, about 8 minutes 36 seconds into it. The rise and fall of an empire. Rome, the rise and fall of an empire. So remember in the past, you know, some months ago, and in earlier clips before I got this far in the documentary, I said that the gladiators were dishonorable. What they were doing was dishonorable. That it was entertainment. It wasn't true martial arts. They weren't the best fighters. Now, according to the historians, and I agree, when they broke out, logically they were facing the local militia, not really an elite unit of Roman guards. You know, these aren't exactly top level centurions. You know, these aren't exactly the special forces of Rome. They're facing a wary militia. Okay, and the weapons that they were using were primitive weapons. They were dishonorable weapons. They were weapons used for entertainment. They weren't trained as combat soldiers. Gladiators weren't martial artists. They were training kind of like the American gladiators with these kind of unconventional, unrealistic weapons. They didn't really have too many great transferable skills, but they had some. And it's the same thing, the idea with the UFC. They're not really trained for real martial arts combat, just for entertainment. Now listen.
The local militia, unused to combat, are wary of the rebels they hunt. They've seen them in the arena. They know the kind of men they're facing. Second-century biographer Plutarch.
The gladiators repelled those who were coming out of the city of Capua and seized from them many weapons that were more suitable for warfare. They happily made the exchange, throwing away their gladiatorial armaments, which they viewed as dishonorable and barbaric.
So, even according to Plutarch, you know, and the historians who obviously get their information from people like Plutarch, second-century historians, the gladiators viewed the weapons as dishonorable. Rewind this clip if you need to hear it again. You know, there you have it. And you can see that UFC fighters are your modern-day gladiators without weapons. It's for the blood that people watch it for. They want to see the violence. You know, this is not truly a martial arts competition. And, you know, I've played clips of at least 2 or 3 Kung Fu experts in the past who have said the same thing. The ground is a weapon. You don't want to be on the ground when you're talking about self-defense and when you're in battle. Another martial artist, and I was an Asian Wing Chun guy, a white Shaolin Kung Fu guy. He has a lot of viewers. He comes off as a little effeminate. He says that the UFC fighting is not the top level of martial arts competition. So then it begs the question, well, what is? You know, and how can you do it in a way that's 100% fair? Well, it goes back to the honor system. and fighting for honor. And then when that fails, you have the camera playback, and you can rewind and, slow it down and see what happened. You can see the blows coming into contact, especially if you have the right camera angle, which in the next match I'm going to improve that. It's going to be a closer camera angle, possibly two, and, it's going to really catch it. But, the video I have, it does a pretty good job when you really slow it down and blow it up. But anyway, yeah, I've been right for a very long time, and these people, I'm going to tell you like this. It is dishonorable to pretend that a dishonorable form of combat that doesn't reflect true transferable skills is the top form of martial arts competition. To even suggest that is dishonorable. To know that you're wrong and to pretend that you're right is twice as dishonorable. So, them doing a dishonorable form of combat is automatically dishonorable by default. It makes them, they've lost their honor. For them to pretend that this is the highest form of martial arts, which is fighting for honor, whether you're talking about the Romans, the Cimbri, or the samurais, and the Bushido code, the martial arts traditions of Africa, fighting for honor, Angola, Biafra, on and on, universally dishonorable for them to do what they're doing. And then for them to play stupid about it, knowing that they're wrong. There's 3 levels of this. Doing it in the first place. Claiming that that it is the highest form of competition, and that it truly reflects who's the top martial artist. And then the level that most of them are at is knowing that their claim is wrong, and they're claiming that to make themselves look good. It's another level of dishonor. They are completely engulfed and consumed with dishonor, and that's not what martial arts is about. It's about achieving martial arts excellency and maintaining your honor. Why do you think they bow before each match? You don't really see the UFC fighters do that. They might touch gloves. They might. There's a difference. They lack the honor. You understand me? They lack it. And I'm not saying you have to bow before each match to have honor. But what I am saying is that when you look at it, there's a lot of specifics that highlight the fact that I'm right. Even when I took Taekwondo, we would bow before we go on the mat. Bow into the dojo. There was honor, codes of honor and morality associated with it, and discipline, and things that there's a lot of different ideas that are just completely disrespected by this kind of UFC barbaric form of fighting. You may as well be going in the ring, naked with a rock and trying to bash each other's brains out. I mean, there's no honor, none. Honor comes for fighting for a good cause and a good reason. You don't risk serious injury or death, to entertain for money. That's dishonorable. That's gladiator dishonor. It's dishonorable. Either we're fighting to the death because we have a very good reason to fight, or we're sparring to prove who has the advantage or who has the better set of skills to fight to the death. Everything else is dishonorable. And for me to have to explain this shows you the level of dishonor American society has accepted. And it's not just martial arts. You can judge a society by its martial arts competition. That's one way to judge it. Because if society is in complete depravity, they will emphasize dishonorable forms of combat and competition, and that's where we are in society.